What once seemed like a medieval nightmare has now become commonplace in Mexico. Although the story has not been fully documented, the main drivers of this extreme form of violence were Los Zetas, a group of mercenaries with military training who dominated drug trafficking from the beginning of the 21st century until their fragmentation into smaller organizations. In 2009, a death squad emerged with the sole purpose of eliminating these infamous killers. Imagine a cartel so sadistic and brutal that it becomes the nightmare of the Los Zetas. We will explore how they emerged, who their members were, what their bloodthirsty methods were, and their relationship with the Jalisco Nueva Generación cartel. Join us as we review some of the bloodiest pages of Mexican criminal history. We warn that things will turn grotesque. On June 18, 2009, in Cancun, state of Quintana Roo, police authorities received an alert around 5 p.m. about the presence of a gray truck with tinted windows and a suspicious appearance. The officers who arrived at the scene immediately knew that it was a drug crime scene. Inside the vehicle, parked in a residential subdivision, they found 3 lifeless men, completely covered in blood, with obvious signs of having been executed by organized crime hitmen. They were handcuffed, with their heads taped and covered with bags, showing clear signs of torture before their violent end. Along with the remains of the unknown people, a macabre message was also found which, according to police versions, was simultaneously a warning and a letter of introduction. We are the new Matazetas group and we are against kidnapping and extortion. We will fight against them in all states for a cleaner Mexico. This is how Mexico met the Matazetas, one of the most brutal and dangerous paramilitary groups in modern history, especially dedicated to killing the infamous Zetas, until then the most feared cartel in the country. The hunters would now be the prey. Soon, videos circulated showing men dressed in black interrogating alleged members of the Zetas, requesting details about their connections to police and politics. The events that occurred after June 18, 2009 were shocking. It is crucial to understand who these criminals were and how they acquired this terrible reputation that still exists. A terrifying facet of the Zetas is their connection to the military sphere. They were trained within the Mexican army, receiving training in tactics and use of weapons at the School of the Americas, originally in Panama, and later transferred to Fort Bragg in North Carolina. Their initial goal was to train Latin American officers to counter leftist movements, but over time, many changed their focus from combating drug trafficking to creating their own criminal network to compete with other criminal organizations. The first assignments of the Zetas were under the orders of Ociel Cardenas Guillen, main leader of the Gulf Cartel. They functioned as the armed wing, intended to eliminate competition and instill fear in civilians. What was distinctive about the Zetas were their methods, using torture and counterinsurgency techniques learned in the military field, but applied in their criminal activities. They pioneered the mutilation and public display of body parts as symbols of war, such as placing severed heads on top of cars. The Zetas were precursors in the creation of narco messages through the display of fingers, organs, and blood of fallen rival hitmen. This became his hallmark. Without exaggeration, this group of militarized murderers was one of the main people responsible for increasing the brutality exercised by the Mexican cartels. If any rival organization wanted to match them, they had to adopt similar methods. The paradigm of drug violence experienced a drastic change, and the independence of the Zetas was only a matter of time. The Gulf Cartel, with years of history, had gone through ups and downs in terms of power and operational capacity. During March 2010, the Zetas decided to separate themselves from being simply a shock troop and form their own drug trafficking clan. It wasn't long before they gained worldwide attention, so much so that in 2014, US President Barack Obama described them as a global threat comparable to terrorist groups in the Middle East and paramilitary cells in Colombia. By the second major attack by the Matazetas, this organization of hitmen was already the main reference for drug violence in Mexico, along with the Sinaloa cartel. The group known as the Zetas was singled out for a series of extremely violent crimes perpetrated in the context of anti-drug operations since 2006. Authorities have accused them of various crimes, including the Monterrey casino fire that resulted in 52 deaths, as well as the 2010 massacre of 71 immigrants from El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, Ecuador, and Brazil. Their history is marked by massacres, beheadings, and unimaginable atrocities, which has given them the reputation of being the most bloodthirsty group in the world. It was foreseeable that some adversary would recognize that the best way to confront such evil was with equally ruthless and remorseless killers. This is how the Matazetas were born. After the macabre discovery of the tortured corpses of the hitmen in a van in Cancun, it took some time before the Matazetas returned to the scene. The armed forces wanted to ensure that their only objective was to eradicate the Zetas cartel, demonstrating to society that the Matazetas did not practice extortion, kidnapping, or affect personal or national assets. They expressed respect towards the authorities. On September 24, 2011, a video was leaked in which 5 hooded individuals promised to kill members of the brutal cartel. This group identified itself as the Matazetas. Despite offering apologies for the killings and stating his intention to demonstrate that the cartel was not invincible, his words were not empty. 4 days before, in Boca del Rio, Veracruz, 35 tied and tortured bodies appeared, a chilling act that was not intended to go unnoticed. Authorities confirmed that some of the victims were members of the Z1 gang. The brutality and speed of these acts raised alarms in Mexico. It was clear that it was a death squad financed by a rival group of drug traffickers that sought to eliminate the Zetas to take control of their territories and plazas. In this scenario, public safety did not follow the premise that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In Veracruz, in a short period of time, 20 individuals were arrested, 8 of whom had ties to the group known as the Matazetas. The press began to refer to them as a new generation in the criminal field. Their testimonies led to the discovery of 3 properties where a shocking find was found. More than 30 skulls of enemies, many of them belonging to the Zas, in an advanced state of decomposition. The notable increase in deaths in such a short time attracted the attention of the media and authorities. The government of then-President Felipe Calderón implemented immediate measures and publicly stated that the Matazetas were not defenders of justice or a peasant self-defense group against drug trafficking, but rather another criminal group that sought to take control of the east coast of the country. An area of great strategic value for drug trafficking. Any action outside the law that claims to be a fighter against crime lacks legitimacy before the state. Regardless of the cause or motivation, you will face legal force. It is crucial to contextualize that at that time, several armed groups emerged willing to challenge the supremacy of drug trafficking in terms of violence in the streets. On the one hand, there were the self-defense groups made up mainly of inhabitants of isolated communities who took up arms to face the criminal threat. On the other hand, in some cases, it was the mayors themselves who encouraged such groups. Mauricio Fernandez, mayor of San Pedro Garza Garcia, the wealthiest municipality in Mexico, generated controversy by announcing the creation of a paramilitary group to ensure security in his area. Although months later, President Calderón forced him to dismantle it, Fernandez boasted of having governed the safest municipality in the country for a long time thanks to the private armies that he financed with public funds. However, the history of this command is not simple. It is known that the Matazetas began as a death squad of the Sinaloa cartel, backed by former members of the Beltran Leyva cartel. The initial objective of this group was to monitor the plazas within the metropolitan area of Guadalajara, where the families of the main Sinaloa leaders resided. After demonstrating their tactical ability and their penchant for homicide, they were entrusted with the mission of protecting and recovering various trading points throughout Jalisco, eventually becoming their center of operations. The relationship between the Matazetas and the Sinaloa cartel was distant, limited mainly to Ignacio Coronel, alias Nacho, a key commander of the Sinaloa group. After his death in 2010, ties were severed. A military operation in Guadalajara captured Nacho, the only link between the powerful cartel and these hitmen. Without his leadership, the Matazetas became autonomous, defending the Jalisco region and eliminating their rivals. Nemesio Seguera Servan emerged as a leader, giving rise to the Jalisco Nueva Generación Cartel, CJNG, a criminal empire that dominates Mexico with an arsenal comparable to that of a regular army. Led by El Mencho, this group is not a direct evolution of the Matazetas, but its origins are linked to that militia. The speed with which they expanded in Mexico was due to the temporary dismantling of other cartels and social chaos. El Mencho used propaganda to present himself as a vigilante, and his legacy persists, while his former rivals, the Zas, have have lost power. Although brief, the history of the Matazetas left a legacy of brutality that still endures in Mexico. Only time will tell if the Chijenji will follow the same fate as its enemies. We invite you to share opinions about the video in the comments section. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell so you don't miss our next videos. See you at the next one.